Hey guys, John here. Today I'm going to be going over a draft recap for the Red Division of the Georgia Tech Pokemon Go Raid Draft. So, it's just like a normal Pokemon Go Raid Draft. You may know it from Pogo Raids, they've done plenty of them. Uh, but we have a few exceptions to the rules, a few additions. First and foremost is that Mewtwo Elemental will get Psystrike. Psystrike had come out by the time we were drafting. It had not in Pogo Raids V7. So we decided to go the route of Chaos and add it to Mewtwo Elemental instead of banning it outright. Uh, Psystrike being extraordinarily good, making Mewtwo one of the best, or the best Psychic type and the best neutral DPS. Um, Probably a mistake, probably should have been banned outright, but oh well. Second major change is that since we drafted when Gen 5 had been released, all Generation 5 Pokemon that are currently released, that is, they were released in the first wave, are eligible to be drafted. So Pokemon such as Excadrill, Chandelure, etc. are all eligible to be picked, although people may not have them. But we'll have to see how that worked out. Thirdly, and lastly, the first rotation of bosses was known. They were Alolan Raichu, Machamp, which were the two quote-unquote permanent bosses, and the three rotational bosses, of which we will pick probably one, maybe two, of Gengar, Piloswine, and Granbull. So people knew to plan for at least those bosses, if not future bosses. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the actual picks. First up, we have RQL taking Mewtwo Classic. He actually looks like an absolute genius here, taking Mewtwo Classic instead of Mewtwo Elemental or Mewtwo Psystrike. Really solid pick. Mewtwo Classic actually covers every boss in this current rotation except for Granbull, and he also has a lot of coverage for everything else, while also being the top Psychic type, while also having great Ghost DPS, while also having great Fighting DPS. Hyper Beam's utterly useless, but Mewtwo Classic is a really, really, really good choice at number 1 overall. Probably what I would choose as well. The only other competition that it might have is Mewtwo Elemental, and that's what Brett takes here at number 2. Don't get confused by the value. Our rules are a little bit different. We gave Mewtwo Elemental Psystrike, which makes it by far and away the best Psychic type, even with the revamped Psychic. And it also has access to the Elemental moves, which is a nice bonus, but honestly Psystrike alone is enough to make it pick number 2. So absolutely no complaints about that. Another pick that I have absolutely no complaints about is Metagross. Again, don't be confused by the value here. We knew the bosses going in, or at least the first wave of bosses, and when you see Granbull and you're sure that Granbull is a boss that could be chosen, Metagross definitely shoots up the board there, and is a very, very good pick. Now it also gets Psychic. It had Psychic. Now it gets the buff to Psychic. Makes it a actually valid Psychic type attacker as well as just a Meteor Mash spammer. So Metagross, really, really good pick at number 3 overall here. Eric follows him up, taking probably the 4th best Pokemon in the draft, Giratina Origin. Really, really good for these bosses. Alolan Raichu is going to be a permanent one, so both Giratina Origin and the next pick here, Groudon, will take care of that. But Giratina does a really good job. Also hits Gengar. Also hits Alakazam if that shows up. Just a really good pick overall. No complaints here either. And Jubs takes, the other Alolan Raichu main counter, which is Groudon, though on the ground side rather than the ghost side here. Right on its ADP. Again, no complaints. Groudon's one of those Pokemon that, does the ground type role really well. Even though it doesn't have the best moves, it has the attack set to make up for it. And yeah, it's a really, really solid ground type. Waldo takes the other one in Kyogre. Again, right at its ADP. Though I do have a little bit of complaints about this. This will be sort of a trend throughout the draft. But water types are largely dependent on weather. If you get rain regularly or in any regular interval, Kyogre is an absolutely stellar choice. It is great DPS. Anything that's weak to water, Kyogre just absolutely destroys. But if you don't get rain, and you don't get a boss that's weak to water, that could mean that your first pick just sits on your bench the whole draft and doesn't actually do anything, which could be a little bit of a letdown. I would have chosen something else here, but Kyogre, not a bad choice. The ADP shows it. People choose it 5th, 6th overall anyway. Definitely not a bad choice here at number 6 for Waldo. Gengar for number 7 overall to Triplus. This is, probably a little bit of a reach. Gengar is really good DPS, but it is really frail. It also does Psychic, so that's why he probably picked it in round 1 here. Or not Psychic, sorry, Poison. So that's probably why he picked it in round 1 here to counter the potential Grand Bull. So not a bad pick. Definitely a little bit of a reach, but not an awful reach. Not a bad pick. Mo here has 2 picks in Rayquaza and Tyranitar, both of which are commonly referred to as draft traps, in the sense that they're really good Pokemon that are really powerful, that are useful, just not as much for draft. You see them on the board, and you see all these other really good Pokemon that you can't pick anymore because they were taken. You see these other Pokemon below you that are more specialists and don't have the big stat numbers that these Pokemon do, both Rayquaza and Tyranitar. But they're just not the best. They're not good. They're not the best, at least. They are good, but they're not the best. Rayquaza does flying really well. Hits Machamp nicely. Dragon's useless, even though its neutral DPS is great. Dragon is useless for the draft. So as you can see from the value, it's a little bit of a reach. Tyranitar, Tyranitar, around 9th, 10th overall ADP, right around where it should be chosen. Does Dark, does Rock. 2 semi-important, or Rock, Dark definitely more important than Rock, but still, some semi-important types. Not an awful pick in Tyranitar. Probably could have gotten something better than Rayquaza, like Moltres. And Triplus takes Moltres here. Definitely a steal, as you can see by the value. Moltres is actually taken 1st overall in most of the Poké Raids divisions. That's why its ADP is so high. But again, they didn't know the bosses. We do. Moltres isn't as useful against these bosses, though it does have Supreme Fire DPS, and also now with Wing Attack and Sky Attack, Supreme Flying DPS. So it is just a solid pick overall. Absolutely no complaints here with Triplus's round 2 pick. Waldo's round 2 pick is Alakazam. I think this is probably chosen right around where it should. This is a very, very solid pick, expected as well. Alakazam's probably, after the 2 Mewtwo's, now the second best, or the next best Psychic. It also has Shadow Ball coverage, so it's really a Mewtwo Classic light. A little more fragile, not as powerful, but still gets the job done really well. So no complaints here with the Alakazam pick. Also, no complaints here from Tubby Jubby taking Honchkrow. Honchkrow is another one of those dual type threats that has flying and dark. Both decent types to be concerned with for draft. Hits Alolan Raichu nicely, hits Machamp nicely, hits Gengar nicely, and also hits some of the future bosses that may show up nicely. So overall, a really solid pick. I think Honchkrow is probably borderline round 1, and I think its ADP shows that. But taking it here in the middle of round 2, definitely a pretty nice steal for him. Yeah. Moving on to Eric here, he takes the first Generation 5 Pokemon, and that is Excadrill. Excadrill, probably the most common of the meta-relevant Gen 5 Pokemon that are out here in this first wave. Covers ground and also covers steel. So that steel pick probably got into his head a little bit for Granbull. But Excadrill's also a really, really good ground DPS. So anything like Alolan Raichu or the dreaded Jolteon also gets handled no problem by Excadrill. Really solid pick here. It's probably about where it should be when it comes to draft ADP here in the middle of the 2nd round. Pick 13-ish. Sounds about right. Solid pick from Eric. Jay begins his spiral into madness, is what I like to say, by picking Dialga here in round 2. definitely a reach. You could say, okay, well, he was worried about Gramble, but he also already had Metagross. So he's going to absolutely destroy any Gramble that pops up and stands in his way. But after that, Dialga's kind of useless. So, its ADP represents that here at 80. That means it probably should have been chosen here in round 10 in our 8-person draft, but here it is. Jay's taking it in round 2. Massive reach. Brett, not reaching, takes Blaziken. Gets really nice value for it, actually. Top Fire, also pretty good fighter as well. Fire is definitely an important type, fighting not as much. But Blaziken is a top fighter after Moltres is gone. Usually it's his next best fire that is taken. And Brett here takes it at pick number 15, which is, right around where it's normally chosen. RQL takes Gardevoir to end out round 2. Gardevoir, definitely a steal here, I think. First big steal other than Triplis's Moltres in here in round 2. Gardevoir has a lot of type coverage. It's really nice fairy. Hits Machamp really hard while also double resisting it. It's fighting type movesets, that is. Don't play around with the steel type movesets. That's just not a fun time. But has a really nice start there. Also covers Psychic. Has access to the move Psychic, which is nice. Gets a nice buff, so he doesn't have to use Synchronoise. Also has Shadow Ball, so Gardevoir has some pretty nice coverage, especially against Gengar. Makes it definitely a top 10 pick in my opinion, and I think you got a steal here at the end of round 2. Moving on to round 3, back with Josh here. He gets a double pick going in between round 2 and 3. He takes Roserade, top grass. I think this is definitely a really nice choice. With Mewtwo and Gardevoir already on his team, he has Roserade he picks Roserade here. He's got Psychic absolutely covered. He now has Fairy absolutely covered because Roserade can use Dazzling Gleam. He's got Psychic or Poison covered for Gramble here with Roserade. May need a little bit of backup, maybe a little bit of neutral DPS. Mewtwo can take care of that. But Roserade definitely really nice choice. Top grass, really good poison. Great utility pick overall, really nice value. Brett follows him up by taking Rhyperior. Rhyperior is it shows it as a nice value pick here, with an ADP of around 12. And I think once you see Groudon go off the board, once you see here now Excadrill, now that we have that go off the board, Rhyperior is your next best option. And it does have access to double ground and double rock movesets, unlike its pre-evolution Rhydon, which makes it really valuable as both a rock and a ground attacker. Again, it's a ground type, does the ground type role really well, resists electric, hits electric hard, while also having access to rock type moves for extra coverage. So pretty good. Jay, again, it's more of a spiral into madness. He, takes a really, good pick, a really bad pick, then a, reasonable somewhat pick. Latios here, he did not pick this with the psychic move change. He had no clue about that, but now he does look like a little bit smarter here, taking Latios. Its psychic moveset definitely helps it here as a psychic attacker. He has Metagross as well, though, so he's covered on the steel and the psychic types now. Latios is useless as a dragon attacker, obviously, but as a psychic attacker, pretty good now. Moving on, Eric takes Togekiss. Togekiss is a pretty good Pokemon here to take. It's got fairy moves. It's also got flying, if you really want to use it for that. Maybe a little bit of a reach here by the ADP value, but he probably saw Gardevoir go off the board. Wanted a fairy, didn't want a psychic necessarily right here. Probably could have gone for a psychic, something like Espeon, but chose to go with Togekiss instead. No biggie. Yeah. Moving on here with Jubs, he takes Swampert. Swampert, right around its ADP. I think it's probably pretty accurate there. Really good water DPS with Hydro Cannon now, and unlike Kyogre, it's not a pure water type. It also has access to ground type moves, so it can be used as a ground type move, though maybe not as effectively as something like a Groudon or a Rhyperior, but definitely still useful. Definitely has a little bit more utility than Kyogre. and has some good DPS to it. Speaking of good DPS, Waldo takes Rampardos literally right on the nose with the ADP of 22, taking it at pick number 22. Really good rock pick. I mean, the stuff that is weak to rock, stuff like Scyther, stuff like Pinsir, even Aerodactyl, they die pretty quickly. So Rampardos' lack of bulk really doesn't hurt it there. So actually, Rampardos is a pretty good pick. Neutral DPS also, doesn't really help in draft, but it's there if you really need it. But he takes his rock type attacker. Rampardos is definitely the best one. Taken round 3, right about where it should be. Triplus takes Gengar, or not Gengar, sorry, he takes Executor. Really good pick here. Has Psychic. If he, he's been playing for a while. If he has a Legacy Confusion Executor, that's even better for double Psychic. And then Executor also has Grass moves, so he can start his Grass team if needed. So really a really nice, solid double pick Pokemon here, or double move Pokemon here. Moving on to another Psychic type here in Espeon. With Mo's double pick, she takes Espeon and Dragonite. One really good pick and one not so good pick. Espeon does its job really well. It's a really nice Psychic type. Kind of outclassed now by Alakazam, if you have a Legacy Psychic Alakazam, that is. But it also benefits from it. Espeon's, just a solid Psychic type. That's all it does, but, that's all you really need a Psychic type to do is be a Psychic type and hit Machamp hard. Potentially the Hitmons if they come back. Meanwhile, Dragonite. I think it's kind of a trend now. Mo's here falling for the trap Pokemon. Dragonite, it's got really nice stats. It's got really great neutral DPS. People used to throw it in gyms all the time back in the day. People used to use it to attack gyms, probably even now. It's, the Pokemon, at least of Gen 1. But it's just not that useful for draft. Dragon type is wholly useless for draft. There are no Dragon type bosses. So Dragon as an attacking type doesn't really do anything. And Dragonite's only other useful move is Hurricane. And it doesn't even have a flying type fast move. And Hurricane is a 1 bar, so you have to charge it all the way up. And just honestly, ADP of 77, in my opinion, that might even be too high. It's just not really useful in draft as much. So she definitely fell for a trap here. Definitely reached for something that she really didn't need to. There were plenty of other good options on the board. But she chose Dragonite anyway, and, that's fine. Triplus takes Scizor with his round 4 pick. Again, a little bit of a reach. The value says, 28. It was chosen 28 rounds earlier than it probably should have. But Scizor is one of those Pokemon that if you know the bosses, if you know Granbull is there, it makes Scizor a little bit more valuable than something like Pinsir or Yanmega that may be better bugs, but don't have the Steel type coverage that Scizor has. Scizor can actually hit Granbull here super effectively, so I think its ADP goes down a little bit with that. Probably not all the way to pick number 26. Still provides good bug coverage. And really, it's hard to go really wrong with these picks here the first few rounds. But Scizor is definitely a little bit of a reach. Moving on to Waldo, he takes Machamp. Machamp is not the best Pokemon I think to pick here. I think the Pokemon picked right after it by Jubs, Breloom, is better, simply because Machamp, really all it can do is fighting. I know it has that extra Steel moveset, and that's probably what was in his mind. He thought, hey, I see Granbull up there. I have nothing that hits that right now, and really only Steel and Poison hit it, and those are two pretty uncommon types. So, I'm going to take something that has some Steel moves, and Machamp does have Steel moves. So it can hit Granbull super effectively, but, not very well. It just doesn't do that job very well. It's much better suited as a pure fighter. And for that role, it does really well, though. But the better fighter to pick in this situation would be Breloom, because its second move is not Steel, is Grass. And Grass is much, much, much more a useful type in the grand scheme of things for draft than Steel is. This is really actually speaking of steal, this is a steal at pick number 28, 14 rounds later than probably it should have gone, according to the Poker Raids ADP. Breloom, just, really good. It has a really nice DPS there with Grass Knot, and also has really nice DPS for fighting with Dynamic Punch, so no complaints there. Eric reaches a little bit here, in my opinion, for Torterra. Torterra's a pretty good grass type. He sees, Breloom just went, Executor went a little earlier, Roserade got taken off the board, and he wants to cash in on the grass type hype. So he takes Torterra. I think his reasoning here was that Torterra, obviously has Frenzy Plant now, hits grass a lot harder than it used to, hits grass pretty nicely. But Torterra also has, that ground typing, and it has Earthquake, so it can, double as a ground type. Although Torterra, as a ground type, is really not its main role, and there are a lot better pure ground types that if you wanted a ground type, if you thought you needed that, there are a lot better options to pick up than Torterra. But as a grass type, now with Frenzy Plant, it does pretty well. Now what doesn't do well is Celebi. Jay decided to take it here at pick number 30. It was only picked in a couple of divisions in Pogo Raids. That's why it has such a high ADP, our first triple-digit ADP. And this is a maximum reach. Celebi is just not that good of a draft Pokemon. I know he hasn't maxed and all, and he's probably thinking, hey, it's, parts grass, parts psychic. Those are two really important types for draft, and he's not wrong about that. But Celebi just doesn't have the moves, and it doesn't have the stats to keep up. There are so many better options at both grass and psychic that Celebi is kind of a non-factor when it comes to draft. And in this draft, with 8 people, 80 picks, probably shouldn't have been picked at all. Brett takes Kingler here. He wants to cash in on the Crabhammer hype. Kingler, really kind of like Kyogre, as I said earlier, is a pure water attacker. It does really well. It has, good stats. Crabhammer gives you a lot of good water DPS, but the problem is he's giving you good water DPS, and if you don't get rain, or if you don't get bosses weak to water, that water DPS does you no good. So ending out round 4 is Garchomp, taken by RQL. I think this is actually a really nice pick. The value shows it at the highest value that we've seen so far at plus 17. Picked 15th overall-ish in Poker Raids, picked 32nd here at the end of round 4. This is a great pick. Garchomp, I think, is shied away from with a lot of people because they don't have the Gibble, or Gibbles, a good one at least, and they also don't want to dump rare candies into one that they do have because it's very hard to get Gibble candy. But Garchomp is definitely worth it. Dragon type doesn't really do much for you, but as a ground type, it is amazing. Probably the best ground type here, simply because it triple resists electric. And electric is the main focus of why you choose a ground type for stuff like Jolteon, for stuff like Alolan Raichu. And it triple resists it's immune with its part ground type, and since it's also part dragon, it resists it again. So you can absolutely just face tank into Alolan Raichu, go to town on it with Earthquake, and you will have absolutely no problem at all. So a really nice pick here to end out round 4 from RQL. Alright, moving right along here with round 5. Sticking with RQL, he takes Heatran. Really nice pick here. Heatran, a lot of people will write off as, it didn't get the best fire moves. It was looking really nice with its stats, but then it kind of got screwed by the movesets, thanks Niantic. But Heatran for draft is actually really nice. It's got great typing, for one. It allows it to tank a lot of stuff, be a lot more tanky than its stats even will say. It dishes out fine fire DPS. It also has access to Steel. It also has access to Stone Edge for stuff like Scyther. It's a lot better for Scyther than something like Rhydon that doesn't really have a fast move to hit Scyther. Meanwhile, Heatran has Fire Spin, which already hits it super effectively. And then Stone Edge comes in and absolutely destroys it. So Heatran, overall, fire type, steel type, covers both of them here. RQL, great value pick, great pick overall with Heatran. Moving on to Brett, who takes Mamoswine with his round 5 pick. The ADP here has it valued as, +9. I don't know, I kind of tend to disagree here. With the ADP at least. Mamoswine is only useful as a ground attacker, I think. Ice is really kind of useless in draft, unless you get snowy, which, being in Atlanta, being in Georgia, we don't. So, Mamoswine gets ground moves, so boosted by Sunny, great ground attacker. The issue why I say this is, a bit of a reach and a bit of a bad pick, despite its nice ADP and value here, is Brett just took Rhyperior in round 3. And Rhyperior covers his ground bases. Like, no problem. He's not going to have any issue with the Jolteon. He's not going to have any issue with the Alolan Raichu. Mamoswine's, it's going to give him some extra ground DPS. Going to let him be more forgiving with dodges. But he didn't need it. He could have gone with something else. He could have gone with some grass here. He didn't have any grass. He could have gone with some dark or ghost. He didn't have any of that. Any psychic counters. So definitely better picks on the board here for Brett. But again, Mamoswine allows him to be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to dodging against electrics. Moving on here, Herjay takes Salamence. Again, the roller coaster continues. Salamence, not an awful pick. Another one of those trap Pokemon, though, that's, pretty good Dragon DPS. All the dragons are. But Salamence actually has a little bit more utility than something like Dragonite or Dialga. Hey. Salamence has access to actually a double fire moveset in Fire Fang and I believe Fire Blast. So even though it's not stab, super effective in the right weather, that can actually be alright. It also has Hydro Pump, which again, being water, hit or miss, but has a little bit more utility, so not an awful pick, but as the ADP and value can tell, probably not a round 5 pick here, probably would have been more suited for round 7 or 8, and I think it would have fallen that far, but Jay takes it here with his round 5 pick. Eric takes another dragon here in Palkia, even more of a reach, actually outdoing Jay. That's incredible, according to the value. Palkia is one of those that's, in my opinion, shouldn't be drafted unless you live in somewhere like Seattle where you get rain every other day. Because Palkia, being a dragon, is useless for dragon and is only good for its second type, which is water. Problem is, it doesn't even have a water fast move. It only has Hydro Pump. So you're relying entirely on a charge move in order to do damage, pretty much. And you have to find a boss that's weak to water. And if you really want, a good time, which you should be after for draft, you need rain, which is just not fun to stand out in the rain tapping your phone with a Palkia. Definitely could have gone for something better, something that suited his team more. He needed some fire at this point. He still needed some, he could have used some backup with either Giratina or Togekiss with a Dark, a Ghost, or a Psychic. Or a Fire. The Fire would have been a lot better here for him to take. But Jubs takes Venusaur. Really, really good value pick here. Round 37. Or not round 37, sorry, pick 37. Venusaur, knowing the bosses, I think goes even higher than pick ADP 30. Because you have the Sludge Bomb on Venusaur hits Granbull really nicely. And Venusaur has, Supreme, Grass DPS. All the grasses are pretty much up there with each other, competing for the top. Venusaur's up there with them. Really nice pick here from Jubs. I have absolutely no qualms about it. Waldo takes Weavile. Weavile is kind of in the same boat as Mamoswine, except in a much better boat, I think, in that it's typing Dark. It's relevant typing. Ice is not relevant. It's relevant typing Dark is actually pretty useful here. It hits Alolan Raichu and Gengar pretty well. It has a really nice DPS. And then it also hits, some future bosses, say like Alakazam. Overall, pretty nice pick, especially at pick number 38 here in round 5. Triplus, with his round 5 pick, takes Rhydon. Probably the best ground available at that time. ADP shows it as a little bit of reach. Triplus probably saw You know, Mamoswine go, he saw Rhyperior go, obviously Groudon and Garchomp have gone. So he's like, oh crap, all the ground types are getting, you know, picked up. I gotta pick one up soon, because if Jolteon comes around, I'm screwed. So he picks up Rhydon. The Jolteon fear, I think, kind of got to him a little bit here. He probably could have waited for Mo's pick. I don't think Mo was going to take Rhydon and taken it here in round 6. Instead, he could have taken something a little bit better. But again, you know, Jolteon fears are real, and if it does come into raids, you better be prepared, or else you're just not going to get a time on that, and you're really going to miss out on some solid point opportunities. So Mo, with her double here in rounds 5 and the end of round 5 and the start of round 6, takes Gallade and Houndoom. Gallade is actually a really nice pick here. Its ADP, I think, will be even lower since the Psychic rework. It got even better. It doesn't have to rely on Synchronoise. It's a really good Psychic type. It's also now a really good Fighting type. Or not really good, I guess not Supreme, but still can do the role of a fighter. And you only really need one of those on your team. There she goes. She takes it. You know, she already had Rayquaza. She already had Espeon. She already had Dragonite. She's going to absolutely destroy those Machamps and Hitmonchans, Hitmonlees, whatever, if they come up with Gallade with this pick. Second pick, also really nice pick, I think. Right around its ADP here is Houndoom. Houndoom's another one of those double type Pokemon here with actually 2 really relevant types in Fire and Dark. She didn't have any Fire to going into this, and her only other Dark was Tyranitar. So she really complemented Tyranitar here with Houndoom, and she got a nice start to her Fire team. Really solid start here with round 5 and round 6 for Mo. Triplus takes Gyarados here. Gyarados, I think, is another one of those trap Pokemon. Kind of like Dragonite, kind of like Tyranitar, kind of like Rayquaza, in that it's a water type, so that, you know, my water type philosophy still reigns true, where you need, you know, a certain set of conditions for it to be useful. And then, you know, people might say, well, Gyarados is a little bit better because, you know, it's like Swampert. It has some utility. It has a double Dark moveset. It has Bite Crunch. Bite Crunch really is a really bad moveset for Dark. I think it might be the worst moveset. Maybe something like Sucker Punch or Feint Attack is worse, but Bite Crunch is just really not that good. And Gyarados doesn't even get Stab on it. And you can't really use it against something like a Alolan Raichu, because Gyarados is double weak to that. So you have to use it on something like Alakazam or Gengar. Yeah, I don't know. Gyarados has some utility, but I don't know. It's a trap where it's, you know, it's too good to pass up, but at the same time, it's also not very useful, and it won't really help your team all that much. So Waldo picks up something that really will help his team in Raikou. This is his first, I think this is the first electric type that is taken. And Raikou actually has the benefit of having Shadow Ball as well. So it's not just a pure electric type, which may or may not be useful in the draft, but Shadow Ball 100% will be, with Alolan Raichu being one of the permanent bosses. Raikou is definitely a really good pick here, as the value shows. Jubs takes a different kind of ghost. He takes Banette. Something that's a pure ghost, and Banette is one of those that really used to be top class. Banette used to be, I think, in the first like 2 rounds every draft way back in the day, because it really was the top DPS. It had Shadow Ball or Shadow Claw, Shadow Ball. That was the ideal combination. Had a decently high attack. It was a little bit frail, but you know that's the risk you have to run. But now with more Pokemon being added and more things getting more diverse movesets, Banette has kind of fallen a little bit, and rightfully so. I think Jubs may have reached a little bit here. He saw some psychic counters going off the board here with Houndoom. I guess you could say Gyarados, Weavile, Raikou now. He's like, well, I need to pick one up myself, so here he goes. Compliments Honchkrow well, though. So he's got a nice, got really solid DPS there against Psychic. So not an awful pick, but definitely a little bit of a reach. Eric does not reach here for Entei. He takes probably one of the best fire types available at the time. You'll see fire types falling is kind of a trend in this draft. Not entirely sure why, but Entei is definitely a really, really nice Pokemon. Has a good bit of bulk, does fire really well. That's all it does. But fire is a really good type to have, so no qualms about that one. Yeah, getting down here to Herjay, taking Slacking. I'm not entirely sure what to say about this one. It has an NA of ADP because it was not chosen in any Pogo Raids division, and rightfully so. It is definitely not worth a pick. Slacking, the one thing that it might be able to do is hit fighting type stuff like Machamp, but that with Play Rough, but at the same time, it also gets hit super effectively by the fighting type stuff, and it dies. Yeah, not really a good pick at all. Yeah, moving on. Brett takes Victory Bell. You know, the ADP says that this one's a little bit of a reach, you know, if you look at the raw numbers, but you have to look a little bit deeper sometimes. I think Victory Bell is actually probably a good pick here at pick number 47. He needed grass to begin with. He didn't have any at this point, so Victory Bell was his first grass. He also saw that he needed some Gramble coverage. Victory Bell also does Psychic, so it's kind of like a worse Venusaur. Victory Bell does have a double poison moveset. Sorry, not Psychic, poison. So Victory Bell, I think, is a really good pick here, knowing the bosses and moving forward. Ending out round 6 now with RQL. He takes Yanmega. Scissor went a lot earlier. Now we have Yanmega going. Yanmega, I think, has some nice utility in that it's a really good bug, and it also has a double flying moveset, so it can help with that if you really need it. So overall, I think it's a solid pick. I think its ADP might be a little too high. Maybe not, but at pick number 48, I think it's right where it should be, and he gets a nice pick here with Yanmega. Moving on into round 7, RQL follows up his Yanmega pick with Crawdaunt. And I actually really like this pick. The ADP actually says he reached for it by four picks, but I don't think so. You know, Crawdaunt has Crabhammer as well, but it's not stuck in the same scenario that something like Kingler is, where Kingler's only really a rock or a water attacker. Crawdaunt also actually has dark type moves, so Crawdaunt can be used as a supporting actor for dark, as well as you know, really nice DPS for water if something like that shows up. So I think, you know, based on the scenario, I think Crawdaunt is actually a really nice pick here. Another really nice pick. Again, not sure how this one fell around or to pick number 50, but Brett gets Zapdos here. Zapdos has, you know, obviously really good electric, and with the move changes a little while back, it also now has Drill Peck. This really helps Brett, I think, with his Machamp endeavors. He had Psystrike Mewtwo, which absolutely destroys Machamp, but one Psystrike Mewtwo isn't enough to get it done, so you need something else to finish it off, and I think Zapdos right here is a perfect pick for that. Really fits that role great with Drill Peck, while also giving him some extra coverage with Electric. I think this is a really nice pick by Brett. Moving down here with Herjay, he takes Mismagius. Again, Herjay's reaching for pretty much everything that he's taking at this point for some reason. Mismagius is, you know, does decent Ghost DPS. He doesn't really have anything else to follow it up, though, with Ghost. And Mismagius is frail enough that, you know, you can't really do it alone with just Mismagius. So, a little bit of a reach, but it's kind of par for the course at this point. Eric here takes Toxicroak. Right around its ADP. I think its ADP actually goes a bit down here. If you know the bosses, you know that Gramble's there. Because Toxicroak is one of those dual types that is a fighter, does fighting decently well, but it also has poison. It's a nice double type there, and poison hits Gramble nicely. So overall, you know, I think a really nice pick, about exactly where it should be picked. Something that should have been picked a lot earlier, but somehow dropped here, is Jubs, picking up insane value here with Sceptile. Sceptile should have been picked way earlier. There were grass types that went way earlier than Sceptile did. Sceptile with Frenzy Plant now is really, really nice grass DPS. Grass is an important draft type, even though it may not be important for these bosses right now. Future bosses, probably, there will be a few of them that'll be weak to grass. Grass is always very important, and Sceptile is a really, really strong grass, so Jub's got a steal here. Really, really good pick. Waldo takes Arcanine right after him. Arcanine actually is probably one of the more interesting picks, I think. It just got some new moves and some new buffs. Arcanine, I think, is now the only Pokemon that has a fast and charge move of the same type of 3 different types. It has a pure fire, a pure electric, and a pure dark type moveset. So it's definitely got a bunch of utility there. But the issue is it's just not all that strong. It's fairly strong, and it's kind of useful as a fire attacker. Usually like a tier 2 or a late tier 2, early tier 3 fire attacker, I think. With a little bit of utility. Might be a little bit useful. I think that's why he picked it for the utility, and also because he wanted some fire. He did not have any before, so decent fire pick. Yeah, overall, alright. Triplets takes Absol, a pure dark, doesn't have any other utility really. I guess Mega Horn, but not really. It's ADP, a little bit of a reach here, maybe. Absol's has good DPS for dark, and that's what he was going after. He was going after some dark type DPS. Since he saw that he picked Gyarados last time, and that's just not going to get the dark type stuff done, so he picked Absol. Overall, decent pick. Probably a little bit of a reach, though. Mo takes Golem and Alolan Executor here with her round 7 and round 8 picks back to back. Golem, while it shows here that she got some good value for Golem, I tend to disagree solely because she has to look at her team currently. She has Tyranitar already, and as I kind of said earlier with Rampardos, is stuff with rock type moves. They don't really need to be that bulky, because the stuff that it hits super effectively don't last that long, and rock really does really does a nice job there. The Golem does have the benefit actually of being part ground type, so she has some coverage there for ground. Eases the Jolteon fears, eases the Alolan Raichu fighting, so not terrible overall. And then Alolan Executor, solid pick here. She didn't have any grass before, now she does have a grass type here with Alolan Executor, pretty bulky. Again, Dragon's not very useful, but picked right here at its ADP where it probably should have been picked. Good grass type pickup. Triplus follows up his Absol pick here, and now in round 8 with a Heracross pick. Again, a little bit reaching, probably a roundish, too early. Heracross does fighting, but not the best. It also does bug, but again, not the best. I think there were better options on the board for him, especially considering his team. He probably could have used some more fire backup. He could have used some more grass backup. Could have used a psychic type Pokemon. He didn't have any of those yet. So yeah, but there are probably better things on the board, but Heracross isn't an awful pick. Waldo here takes Lugia, and I think his thought process here was, I've already got Alakazam. I've got something that has, some really good DPS, but may not last that long. So I'm gonna, get in there on Machamp, do as much damage as I can. Alakazam faints, I throw in Lugia, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. And for that, I think it's, a really nice choice. I think he's pretty solid there for Machamp now. The problem is with Lugia, you just don't get the same DPS as you do with other Psychics or other Flyings. But Lugia has the bulk to really anchor your Machamp team, so that you don't really have to worry about it and you can focus on other things, which is what he does. Yeah, so moving on to Jubs here. He takes Gramble with the 60th pick overall. This is rated as a little bit of a reach. I really like Gramble, though, as a fairy attacker, not as a dark attacker. I know it does get a double dark moveset, but it's kind of in the same boat as Gyarados, where probably shouldn't be using it as a dark. You should probably be getting a more of a dark specialist. But Green Bull here has fairy type moves and it uses them really well. Um, in Cloudy, it can really hit Machamp, and along with his Honchkrow pick, I think he will have some really nice DPS there on Machamp as well. So yeah, moving on to Eric. He has Tangrowth here with his 8th round pick. Gets some decent value here. Probably the best, maybe tied with Leafeon as the best remaining grass type. Although Tangrowth has a little bit more bulk. Again, really pretty solid. I think he had Torterra earlier, so Tangrowth plus Torterra, that's about all you need for grass types. Everything else you can kind of chunk down if you need it with your neutral DPS, because both of those are fairly bulky picks. So his grass is covered. He doesn't have to worry about that anymore. But I think the world needs to worry about what Jay is picking next. You thought slacking was bad. Well, here comes Snorlax, a Pokemon that again has no ADP because it should never be chosen in any draft ever. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters if you're in like a 20-person league and you're having 200 picks. I don't think Snorlax is in the top 200 picks for draft. It's just not useful. It survives a long time. It's great at that, I guess, but it just doesn't do anything. It's a normal type, and really the only normal types worth taking is Porygon Z, and even then as a really late round pick, and more of a specialist anyway. But Snorlax definitely doesn't belong in the draft. Definitely does not belong on anyone's team. Hopefully he does not make this mistake later in a future draft. But Brett is making no mistakes here. I mentioned earlier with the trend of fire types falling. Well, here is Charizard taken at pick 63. Yeah, you heard that right. Taken way after when it should have been. Charizard, really nice fire type here. Gets Blast Burn. Technically also has a flying type moveset, but probably shouldn't be used for that. Overall, as a fire type, really nice. Brett already had Blaziken, so Charizard is a great complement to it. And his fire team is rockin'. Speaking in rockin', well, it's not a rock type at all. I was going to make a pun, but it's not. RQL takes Electivire. It's one of those where, good value here. Electric, maybe not needed as much as any other types, and Electivire is a pure electric. It doesn't really have any utility like Raikou or Zapdos does. But at pick number 64, the DPS margins on it are just too good to pass up. It can help even in neutral weather with something like Aerodactyl or Scyther even. Maybe even Starmie or Azumarill if those show up. So, a pretty safe pick here by RQL. No qualms with it. Get some good value as well. Alright, and rounding out the last 2 rounds here, we start again with RQL taking Aerodactyl. I really actually like this Aerodactyl pick. Aerodactyl recently got its rock moves. So it has both a rock fast and rock charge move. That makes it a really good rock type. For draft, it's got some really nice attack, and I think the ADP value shows that. He got a really good steal here at pick number 65 here in round 9. Moving on to Brett here, he takes Cat Turn. I see why he took this pick. Again, right around that ADP, mid to high 60s, at 70 there. I see why he took that pick. His only grass was Victory Bell at this point, which is not necessarily the best grass for staying alive. You often need a backup. Victory Bell is usually used as more of a complement to another stronger grass type. Obviously, all those are gone by now. So he takes Cacturne. And I think he takes it because he wants, the grass type, but he also wants a little bit of help when it comes to dark. He doesn't really have any of that right now. He doesn't really have any dark or ghost since he took Elemental Mewtwo, so he doesn't have access to Shadow Ball there. So he's got late start there, but he's got it at least a little bit. Jay. Actually not throwing a pick for once. He takes Ho-Oh here, which actually has a really nice value. Ho-Oh's actually a pretty good Pokemon for draft. It's bulky enough so that it fits Jay's criteria of not dying. But it also has a pretty decent moveset that's only been getting better every time they add moves to it. It can work as a fire type, it can work as a flying type. Ho-Oh is actually a decent, overall pick, especially for round 9, pretty nice pick. But considering his previous 8 picks, Ho-Oh can only do so much. Eric here takes Azelf. Again, it has an NA because in Pogo raids, Azelf isn't allowed since they are worldwide. Here, since we're all in America, then we all had a chance to raid and get Azelfs. So Azelf is eligible. And he takes Azelf here. I'm surprised it lasted this long. Azelf, if it were allowed in Pogo raids, would probably be top 20 pick. It's around the same level as Alakazam is. Slightly slower, but still really good Psychic. All it does is Psychic, but hey, it does it really well. Eric, I think, got a really nice steal here at pick number 68. Let's just hope he has Dura Candies in order to dump into it and max it. Jubs takes Magnezone here with his 9th round pick. Again, pretty good value pick here. Solid electric type DPS, which is always nice to have. And he also gets the added benefit of Flash Cannon, even though that's a pretty subpar move, and Magnezone doesn't have a fast Steel type move. He does get the benefit of the doubt versus Scramble there, with a little bit of extra help with that Steel type Flash Cannon move. Waldo takes Lucario with his 9th round pick, right around its ADP here of around 70. Lucario is one of those Pokemon that's a fighter, and it does that relatively well. The advantage of having Lucario over something else, over another fighter, is Lucario's typing part Steel, so it resists any normal type attacks, which is what you would probably be using your fighters for. So Lucario in that sense is a good pick here. It also has a little bit of utility with Shadow Ball, and I think Dark Pulse as well. So yeah, he can use it for that if he needs to. Probably won't come in that much handy though. Triplus takes his signature Crobat. I think he's done this for. I'm pretty sure he did it last draft, and I think he might have done it the first draft as well. That he participated in, but he takes Crobat here. I see why he took it. He wanted a fighting, to help with Machamp, or a flying to help with the fighting types, Machamp and Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, that kind of stuff. And he also wanted something that was poison to help with Gramble. Since we know that Gramble's here. The only problem is Crobat is just not all that good. I mean, there are some better options. He already has Gengar when it comes to poison. And I guess that's what he was going for. He wanted a full poison team. He didn't want to try to go Steel, or he didn't want to just try to neutral DPS, which I think would have been his better option, just sitting there with Moltres, since he already has Moltres. And then Crobat's flying type is, again, kind of useless when you already have Moltres. A little bit redundant, but, and as you can see, his ADP value paid the price for it, but, that's his signature pick then. That's what he did. Mo, with her final 2 picks here at the end of round 9 to start around 10, are Alolan Golem and Pinsir. From first look, it looks like she got really good value here on Alolan Golem, plus 21, which is stellar, until you realize that she already has both Tyranitar and Kanto Golem. So I guess she was picking Alolan Golem for the electric type, and she wanted that, that dual type threat of rock as well. But honestly, it's hard to understand that. There are plenty of other options out there, plenty of things that she could have helped cover. Her only fire type, for example, is Houndoom, so you could have gotten another fire type. You see, further down there are 2 fire types that definitely should have gone earlier that she could have taken. So the Alolan Golem here, probably a big mispick, even though the ADP values, speaks a different story. She already had plenty of rock; she didn't need any more. Pinsir, on the other hand, is a pretty decent pick. Really good bug type DPS. It also has fighting moves. Yes, technically it does. Not the best to be used as a fighter, though. I guess you can use it in a pinch versus something like Porygon, but it's not going to get the job done versus something like Miltank, something more with more bulk. But Pinsir, mainly used as a bug, can help out with some nice DPS, really easy to dodge with all that kind of stuff. So, decent pick with the pincer, not as much with the Alolan Golem. In her draft, it's finished with that. Triplus finishes his with Typhlosion. This was one of the fire types that I was surprised it dropped this far. Really good fire DPS. All the fire types after Moltres and Blaziken and Chandelure that we'll get to later are around the same strength, DPS wise and TDO wise. So Typhlosion going at 74, travesty. But hey, Triplus says, you know what? I'll take it. I'll pick it up. And now he has a really good complement to his Moltres. Waldo takes Flygon here. From his ADP value, it looks like this is a bit of a reach, and it might be, but Flygon's getting a Community Day move soon, and if it is Earth Power, which would be, I think, the best case scenario, Flygon would actually be sort of like a budget Garchomp, in the sense that it triple resists Electric. Again, Dragon isn't useful, but it triple resists Electric, and has pretty good ground moves, so it would be able to do the job pretty well against any Electric types that come up. So for that, I can understand this pick, and I can kind of forgive the negative ADP value pick. But he takes Flygon with his last pick to round out his team. Jubs now takes Flareon. This was the other fire type that I was appalled that dropped this far. Following along with this draft, I was just waiting for the day that someone picked Flareon, and it just never came, and then round 10, here we are, middle of round 10, pick number 76, Jubs says, wait, Flareon's still here? That's crazy. I'll take it. And it's kind of interesting because his team, if you look down his team, he didn't take any fire types until now. And that really could have, screwed him. If Mo would have actually taken Flareon here instead of Alolan Golem, Jubs probably would have been left having to take something like Infernape. A really, third, fourth tier fire type. That isn't all that good and can't really carry a fire team. Meanwhile, Flareon, on the other hand, still has that really good DPS and enough TDO to matter. And I think he actually has the highest value pick of the entire draft here. Eric also gets good high value with Hariyama. Hariyama's the same, kind of in the same boat as Machamp. They're identical in moveset. Hariyama's a little bit bulkier, but with less attack than Machamp. So pretty much the same thing goes there. Hariyama's probably picked more at the right position than Machamp was. Machamp was probably picked a little bit too early. But Hariyama here is a good enough fighter. It can also technically do steal if you need it to. But he has Toxicroak, which I think should really... Toxicroak and Excadrill, actually. So Hariyama would be a nice anchor for that team versus Granbull. Herjay finishes off his draft with another questionable pick here in Umbreon. Umbreon has a really high ADP because not many people choose it at all. It doesn't have the dark type DPS to really matter all that much. There were plenty of other good dark type DPSers. I know Shiftry was still available, Sharpedo was still available here. He probably has one maxed already. Again, I think he chose his team based on gym defense because he has some pretty good defenders on his team. But yeah, that's enough about that one. Brett takes Scyther with his last pick. A good pick. He just saw Pinsir get taken by Mo. He was probably eyeing that one a lot. But here he is, taking Scyther. Next best bug, sure. Has extra flying type moves if you want him. With stab, sure. Overall, a decent pick around its ADP. No problems with that. And with the final pick, Archewell brings us home with, I think, the steal of the draft, not the Flareon. With the steal of the draft, RQL finishes it with Chandelure. Chandelure's really in a tough spot. It's extraordinarily good. It is, probably debatably the top ghost, debatably the top fire as well. Two extraordinarily important types for draft specifically. The only problem is, since Gen 5 just got released, nobody or very few people have a Litwick, and even fewer have a Chandelure, because they're extraordinarily rare to find in the wild. They only come from 10k eggs, and even then, rarely. And if you're lucky enough to even get a Litwick, and have good IVs, in order enough to use, you still have to get a Unova Stone, which you only get a chance at getting at once every 7 days. So really the odds are not in your favor for getting a Chandelure, but if it pays off, if you actually get that Unova Stone, if you can get a hold of a Litwick, a good Litwick even, you're that Chandelure is a round 1 pick potential at pick number 80. So I mean I think that's an incredible steal. I think everyone else kind of shied away. They were too scared about the RNG factor there. RQL finally bit the bullet and said, "Hey, you know what? If I don't get lucky, I don't get lucky, but if I do, I am absolutely knocking this pick out of the park. Plenty of fire, plenty of ghost. That's all I need. Those 2 types cover a lot of draft stock. So great pick from there. Great way to end off the draft at round 10 here."